Good day. I want to do this video about the legitimation legitimation of coexistence. Because I think we have a problem with that. Nobody knows why. Why should we have this? So I want to do a little bit of brainstorming. Let's start. What do I think about when I think about why should we coexist? Well, obviously the law. The law. Because if you don't follow the law, you go to jail, which is bad. What else is there? The law comes from morals and ethics. Morals and ethics, they come from religion, right? Or they overlap. And then, this is the main point I want to make, is the question, can we find a logical conclusion? So is there a logic why we should coexist? So, let me just get this nicely ordered. By the way, if I forgot something, feel free to add it in the comments. But then, when I think about where could I find a legitimation for coexistence, I think about these things. Nothing more, nothing less. So let's start with the law. So, first of all, when we talk about the law, we have to recognize each country has their own law. So there's no universal law, which is already a problem, because we have differences between different societies. That leads to the second point. We have law in a society and we have law between societies, or we wish we would have law between societies. So let's split after this first. First, do we have a legitimation of coexistence between societies? In the law, right? In the law, is there a law that says between societies, this is why you should coexist? And the answer, historically, and if you look at Israel and Gaza right now, is no, we don't have a legitimation for coexistence. Let's look at in societies. That would mean we have to look at every law in every society and judge them individually, which is a long and arduous process, but I think there's a faster way to this. And what's what's my point of argument? My point of argument is the law itself, right? There are different laws in society. There's a law that you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't murder, you shouldn't steal. But there's also law, you shouldn't park in the wrong parking spot, park on disabled parking places, you shouldn't jaywalk, walk the road where you're not supposed to walk over the road, right? You shouldn't go over a traffic light that's about to turn red. So we have plenty of laws. And some are more tragic if you break them, and some are less tragic if you break them. But it doesn't matter if it's more or less tragic, because law is law, and we realize that so many people break the law. I broke the law. I know I have run over a traffic light once in my life, at least. Speeding with the car, that's against the law. So if you speed, you broke the law. So now you bring up the argument, that's the scale of things. The scale of things doesn't matter. Either you broke the law or you don't break the law, and if you broke the law, then you can't find a good legitimation for coexistence for someone who offends against it. So, in my opinion, the law doesn't matter to society, by the way. I simply put too weak of an argument. Which brings us to the next point. Morals and ethics. So, what are morals and ethics? Personal convictions, for example. You shouldn't kill because, I don't know, because it is wrong. Why is it wrong? And this is where most of the morals and ethics have been lifted from religion. And I don't want to go about the religious morals and ethics in this kind of segment, because they belong here. So what other morals and ethics are there which are not religious? Right? If they are in the 10 Commandments, for example, then they belong in religion. They don't belong here. So what remains? What remains is the French Revolution, the Declaration of Independence, so the Age of Enlightenment. That is what remains in morals and ethics. And most importantly, social contract, the theory about social contract. What does the theory about social contract say? We have it here. Social contract theory is a cornerstone of political and moral philosophy. It proposes that societies are formed by an agreement among individuals where they relinquish some freedoms in exchange for the benefit of living in a structured society. Okay. So it says you give something up to gain something. Is there a legitimation of coexistence? No, because the first argument is, why should you give something up to goal, right? If you're a pure freedom guy, maximum personal values, then and personal liberties, then you wouldn't agree to this contract. You're already out. Number two, which is my main weak point of this contract, is that the contract always gets redacted. It gets overwritten. And there is no form of your acceptance. For example, if they increase the age at which you can get rent, in which you can go into retirement, they don't ask you, they just do that politically. There should be a democratic vote over this, because this is infringing on your social contract. You pay taxes, so you have the right to what is stated in the contract at the time at which you were accepting it. So, and second, this is only a thought, right? This theory is only a thought theory. This is not an actual contract. No one needs to sign this, right? You get born and you get placed in it. That's like slavery. You get born in slavery, you get placed in slavery. So you don't have the right to refuse. So, can you legitimize something if you give the person no right to refuse it? And the answer is, if you do that, you can do that, but if you do that, you end up with a slavery model, with a type of slavery. Because you force your will upon others, and that means there is no actual free will of the person. So this is a bullshit theory. Like, it's what we're working with, but it's bad. So religion, I want to skip that at first. I want to go first with a logic approach, and then at a later point in time come back to religion. Because it's very complicated. There are lots of religions out there, and you need to differentiate in between them, because they represent different values sometimes. So it's not easy. And basically, I know way too little to judge all religions. Because who am I to judge a religion I don't know nothing about? That's maybe a failure for a receipt for failure. So let's go and ask the question: is there a logic solution? So, coexistence. So, is there a logic solution? So how does logic work? That's the first question. And in my opinion, logic works one of two ways. The first way is you have argument A argument b, and if they both are true, then you have argument c, you have a conclusion, and you come to the conclusion that argument c must be true as well. That's the first way logic works. But there is another way, there's a second way, how you can logically come to a conclusion. Right? And that is, you want the solution. In this case, it's argument C. That's my solution. And you want it to be true. By the way, that's how chess works, right? In chess, you think from the end game. Like, what makes Magnus Carlsen such a great chess player? Because he's always ahead in the end game. That's where his strength lies. He knows the solution he wants, and then he only has to reflect which moves bring him closer to the solution he wants. So, and then you can subsumize that argument A must be true, and also, for this to happen, argument B must be true. So, that is how logic works. You have one of two ways. You either go with the straightforward way, or you go with the end game. And you say, this is the end game I want, therefore this needs to happen. Back to the original question. Is there legitimation for coexistence? So, logically, do we have an argument which says A true, B true, therefore C true? No, we don't. Or rather, like, educate me. If you think differently, if you, in the whole process of thoughts, think differently, write it in the comments. I'm always willing to learn. Therefore, we have to go with approach B here. So, and what are the arguments? What is argument A? What is argument B if we have a legitimation for coexistence? First of all, we have some form of legitimation. Then we have co, and then we have existence. These are the three parameters that we need. come to the conclusion that we have all these three parameters and we can align them in a way that makes this true, then we have a logical conclusion that this must be true. Because there is a result in which this is true. The first thing which is true is existence. We exist. Therefore existence is true. Maybe a side question. If we're talking about legitimation for coexistence, do we talk about the past, the present, or the future? Right? Because it's actually in this kind of logic included. It can't be the past. Because if it was in the past, then these arguments were already true. So in the past we didn't have. We didn't have a legitimation for coexistence. Presence. Do we have a legitimation for coexistence? This is where probably some would disagree, but I say we don't. Because I couldn't find it in our previous mind map, where we go through law, through society, through religion. I don't think it's included. So true, not true. It's false. In the past we certainly didn't have, like Holocaust. Is there legitimation for coexistence that is widely spread, that is logically accepted? No, obviously not. At current stage, with the conflict in Gaza, do we have a legitimation why we shouldn't fight? We don't have one. Because the fighting is still ongoing. Which leaves only the future. So with this kind of argumentative structure, you can only impact the future. You cannot revert past tense. So we should think about this in future terms. Do we have existence in the future? If we start Third World War, we don't. So we could have a legitimation for coexistence if we don't start the Third World War, and if we don't start the Third World and not bomb everything to shit, then we might have an existence and therefore a legitimation for coexistence. What is the co? The co means more than one. Right? It has to be at least two in order to coexist. More to that in another another picture, another slide, if you so will. And then the question about legitimation and where do we take this legitimation, that this should be the thing that should be happening. Well, if you look historically, where does legitimation come from? It comes from consensus. If we all agree that this is legitimized, it is. Simple, right? If everyone agrees this is the thing to do, it is legitimized. So all we have to do, we have a consensus more than one exist. Live. So, do we have a consensus on this topic? And the answer is probably no. And the problem lies with the code. Because people don't want other people included in the code. Right? For example, the Islamic State doesn't want to have foreigners, Christians, and so on in their territories. So they're denying them the right to live. And in return, they will get denied the right to live. So we don't have a consensus at currently, and we probably won't have a consensus in the future. If you're not yet educated, why this is the best choice. Right. Because if you think this is the best choice, you would obviously opt into this legitimation for coexistence. At which point it would become logical, and if it's logical, it's true. And if it's true, then we don't have to deal with wars anymore. We don't have to deal with killings anymore because people understand that it's bad to do such a thing. Thank you for your attention, and I'll be releasing a second video in which I go more in depth about how we can use this, first how we can view the world in a more simpler way, which lets us more easily approach the matter that we reach a consensus. About these three things. In fact, I personally would, in just of more than one, I would include everyone. Personally. Because as soon as you exclude someone, the system has cracks. So thank you for listening, and if you have any ideas or opinions, leave them in the comments section, and I'll make some time to look through it and try to answer you, or get myself educated. Like, maybe you're smarter than me, who knows. So thank you for your time, and I hope it wasn't a waste to think about this topic. Yeah.